to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. It is Friday. If you listened this morning, you heard me talking about a lot of stuff that doesn't matter to this in the grand scheme of things, but, here we are. This evening, we are going to talk about not the display that I just witnessed in Walmart after I was picking up some groceries and my copy of No Way Home finally. No, we are going to talk about Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore. There's a lot to unpack here. A lot to unpack. It's not I don't want to say it's a deep movie. Here's the thing. Crimes of Grindelwald set the bar so low that to manage to make a movie that cannot step over that bar, which is all you would have to do to clear the bar of the previous movie, is step over it, it would have been difficult. It would have been very difficult for them to do that. That said, this movie is still not great, but it's better than the last one. Here's the thing. I feel like part of the problem is they started the first movie, and then the first movie ends with Grindelwald, and then they have to continue with Grindelwald, otherwise you run the risk of audiences not being fulfilled in the story. And what we're witnessing with this, with this series of movies, this pentalogy of movies as it stands, right now it's a trilogy, and if this one doesn't make money, this will be the end of this series. They will not be making any more. They said that over the last few days. They're like, look, we are waiting to see what the box office results are from Secrets of Dumbledore to see if we make 2 more movies. That's going to be the ultimate deciding factor. And at the end of the day, I don't think this is the solution. In the same way that, Tenet was not the savior of movies, I don't think this is the savior of this franchise. And I think that, here's the problem. I don't know if anyone remembers my comments on Jessica Jones, when I was watching that, or Iron Fist, or even Daredevil to an extent. My issue with those shows is that they spend let's go back to season 5 of The Flash, because that's the one that I've most recently, I think, commented on. Besides, Iron Fist, which I've mocked ad nauseum, but going back to season 5 of The Flash, they very quickly figured out who the bad guy was, what his motivation is, and what his powers are. So then every episode that they don't catch him, it feels like they're being stupid, because every other hero, every other villain they've caught up until this point, including big names ones, like Trickster, like Mirror Master, all those other people, it's we know who they are and what their shtick is. And it's kind of the same thing here, because we've known Grindelwald is the bad guy since the beginning. Since the first movie, we've known Grindelwald was the bad guy, because he shows up at the very end, and it's Grindelwald was the one trying to secure the Obscurial. Or the Obscurus. I don't remember which is the term for the person who has an Obscurus or an Obscurial, and which one is the name for the actual, thing, the angry cloud of death. And it's this movie I think it's just boring is what the problem is. I think that's probably the biggest sin this movie makes, is that it's just not interesting. Where the fuck is my bag? Why did I put it in the back seat? I left my soda back there. But watching this movie now and seeing what ended up happening in regard to the the Wizarding world at large, it is apparent to me that there's very little plan into what's going to happen here. And it's obvious to me this motherfucker next to me is listening to Bass Hunter. Very loudly listening to Bass Hunter. I gotta commend him for that. That is a fucking good choice in music. sorry, I'm completely off track now. So I'm looking at this this movie, and I'm like, it's just fitting because this movie was announced while I was in college, and this was a huge hit when I was in college. Not that the song was a huge hit, but like the idea like of the like Bass Hunter was a big thing freshman year. And I, or at least it was a meme at some point. I remember listening to the music. I remember hearing that music a lot. So I was like, I heard it out of my periphery, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then it caught on, and I was like, "Oh, I know what this is now." Anyway, off topic of Bass Hunter, onto the topic of Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. Like, this movie introduces a lot of really cool concepts, and I think that J.K. Rowling overestimates how much we want to see the various bureaucracies across the wizarding world and across Europe. I do not care to see the American Ministry of Magic, the American Congress of Wizard, whatever, MACUSA, whatever the fuck they called it in Fantastic Beasts. I don't care to see the French Ministry of Magic. I don't care to see the German Ministry of Magic. Quite frankly, I don't care to see the British Ministry of Magic. But it's like, okay, cool, we keep seeing all this shit, but who really cares? And it's like, they do this thing where it's like, and then deep in the Himalayas, there is this place where like the seat of magical government is held. And I'm like, I'm sorry, how is this literally the first time we're hearing of this? Like, how is it the first time we're hearing, oh, by the way, the Minister of Magic is not like, there's a bigger super government that is also in charge, and more in charge, and it's in the source of magic, and it's like, well, what the fuck? And then it's like, they go like, it is the source of some of the most important magic we have, and I'm like, such as, like, instead of showing us what the German Ministry of Magic is, and the bureaucracy that goes along with that, why not talk about that a little bit? That is way more interesting than, anything else they've shown. So, like, this nonsense happens, and they go, like... And the thing is, too, it also raises questions as to, like, why the fuck was this not something that was addressed during Harry Potter? Because, like, you would think that, like, oh, hey, by the way, you remember Grindelwald? Yeah, that motherfucker who tried to take over the fucking, like... It's just haphazard, the creation of these things, and when you're building a world, you can't be so haphazard with these big, broad-stroke concepts. They're important. And it's like, if you're going, like, how government works, and if there is another governing body, that is a big, important deal. And the other thing is, too, it's like, the problem with this is, like, it doesn't solve the problem, but everyone acts like it does. Like, at the end of this movie, Grindelwald escapes again, and then the problem is, everything he's said, it still resonates. And then on top of that, like, the way, like, where he escapes from sets up this thing where it's like, he can very easily say, oh, well, they were lying. Because, like, the entire plot of this movie is contingent on this fucking baby deer. Like, Newt goes to this, and sees this thing, it's called a chillin. But basically what it is, it's a baby deer that bows down to those who are pure of heart. And apparently that's how the Wizarding World chooses its, like, minister above, like, over minister, like, king minister, I guess, or, like, emperor minister, like, whatever you call the highest, wizard in the world, like, that is selected by this deer. Because the deer can't be fucked with, apparently. Except for Grindelwald, who manages to fuck with the deer. Like, it's such a dumb thing. And, like, you would think if this was something that was happening and you're going to have this massive election. First of all, considering that this movie shrinks the timeline by a substantial margin, because, what's her name? I know the actress named Jessica Williams, she's from The Daily Show. But because, like, it's like, oh, that was a year ago. The first Fantastic Beasts and Crimes of Grindelwald were both a year ago. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was a much longer length of time between movies. Oh, well, whatever. So, the problem is, like, well, what the fuck? Like, if that's the case, why did the first we're hearing of it, that there is an election, and it's so poorly laid out that it's like the election, like they're talking about the election early on in the movie, and Newt says to Theseus, like, so who does the ministry want to win? And they're on their way to, they end up in Berlin, and I'm like, oh, this is like the election for the German Minister of Magic in the 30s, which nothing could possibly go wrong here. And then, like, to like, with all that going, and then what happens, like, no, it's not for the, and then it's like, they're electing the German Minister of Magic, and it's like, well, one of them's last name is Santo, like, one's Asian, and one's Hispanic, and I'm like, that doesn't seem quite right for Germany in the 1930s. I think that's something else that this show really, these movies don't really address, is that, like, the Wizarding World, I don't think is this magical, all-inclusive place that they kind of make it seem. If I'm being honest, in all likelihood, in reality, the Wizarding World would be just as fucked up as the real world. So to be like, the Wizarding World's above, believing in what the Nazis say, I don't think that would be the case. I also don't think it would be the case that, like, say Theseus is dating, like, Theseus has definitely a thing for black women, like, Theseus is with Letta Lestrange, and it's the 1930s, and I don't care if you're a wizard, or if you're a non-wizard, it is not something that, like, it's not going to be looked at very well. I mean, I don't think. And it's like, it's just one of those things. And it's kind of like Legend of Korra, to an extent, where Legend of Korra has, in season 1 specifically, Amon is there, and Amon is raising some, not invalid points about the treatment of non-benders. Like, his methods are ridiculous, but the points he raises about the treatment of non-benders are not unfounded. So then when Korra takes him out and restores the bending of the benders that he took the bending away from, it doesn't solve the problem, because his followers are still there. There will just be someone new. And like, to say that, Amon is, he's a bender, so that's going to clean the issue up, it's like, well, no. Because now we're just going to make these people who already believe this way, it's going to make them double down and be like, oh, so they're using us. So they think that little of us, that we're this stupid. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is just kind of silly. And it's the same thing here, where it's like, he doesn't get elected to be over president of the magical world, so, like, anyone who believes in him, it's like, it's so stupid, I think. Tina's reduced to basically a glorified cameo. She has some lines, and I, like, at the very end of the movie, and I feel like that may or may not have something to do with the public stance of Catherine Waterston against what J.K. Rowling said before the script was finished. It's that kind of thing that, like, it's kind of silly. And then, like, a lot of the rest of the movie kind of gets nonsensical, where it's like, they have, like, apparently the Quillin, like, the way, or the Chillin, Quillin, I think, is a Pokemon. The Chillin, which is not a better name, but it is, certainly worse than Quillin would have been. And it's like, the way it works is that it can see the past, present, and future of everyone involved, of whoever it looks to, and tell if it's a good person, pure of heart, good leader, all the glittering generalities that, make it seem like, this person is, ideal and fit to lead. You're gonna get hit by that red light camera. Ooh, no, you made it. I wouldn't have risked it. As evidenced by the fact that I'm messaging at this red light. But if all of that's happening, and that's what we're looking at, and we're being like, this is what's going on. This thing can also see the future, and he can use it to see the future. And because of that, like, that's the problem, is that, like, there's so much that's known, but it's not explained how they know. It's like, how did they know that he killed it? And maybe they just knew that, like, that a moment of exposition about, like, oh, by the way, this is how the Quillen works. Like, a moment of exposition just to be like, okay, everyone makes sense, good, go. And then it's like, because the whole plan is, because he can see the future, they ask the question, how can you keep track? How do you, keep that from happening? Like, how can you attack someone who can see you coming? You gotta confuse what's going to happen. Keep the plans overlaid on each other, contradicting each other, so that way no one knows what's going on. And it's a good idea, it's just kind of poorly executed in this movie. And again, I say this, J.K. Rowling is not a screenwriter. Screenwriting and novel writing are two very different skill sets. And if you read the Harry Potter, like, books, they don't have a very cinematic ending to any of them. The endings are non-action packed. The endings are a lot of exposition being delivered, and a lot of people just talking to each other and being like, oh, hey, so this is what, like, exposition as a climax, which in a book works. In a movie, it doesn't. So, like, that's why when you watch Fantastic Beasts 2, the third act is basically a giant Boond meeting. And, with very minor action sequences to keep Paris from burning down. It's the same thing with the third act of the first one, where it's like, oh, we are here to keep the we're here to keep the Wizarding World from, or New York from being thrown apart by the Obscurial. So it's, again, very minimal action, just keep the Obscurial from destroying everything. This one's kind of the same thing, where it's like, well, they're doing it's basically the same plan as Deathly Hallows, where they have to keep Harry from being captured by Voldemort by and they refer to it in the movie as three-card Monty, which is like, you don't know which is the one that has what you need, so they gotta split up and attack all of them. And it's that kind of thing, where it's like, again, works well in a book, and it works well in the beginning as an inciting, kind of action sequence. Does not work as well if we're gonna sit here and do a fucking thing like this, where it's like, this is gonna be the summation of the drama, and it's just not interesting. It's not fun to watch. It's, it is not, and it's not worth, exploring as a, what's the word I'm looking for here? As a climax. Then there's the whole issue of, does, like, I don't know, there's a lot wrong with this movie, like, but it's better than the last one. And I think not the least of which is the fact that very little is explained, and it's not that it's not explained for good reason. It's like, it's just not explained. And then by the time you get to the third act, and it's like, there are 5 suitcases, and they're very odd the fact that there are 5 suitcases, and there are all these people going, and it's like, okay, all these people have suitcases, and then it's like, oh, well, there's still one person who hasn't been accounted for yet. Like, so what's, like, how is this gonna turn out? It's so silly to me. It's just, there's so much here that's just not working, and there's no reason for this to have wrapped up the way it did, because it's just not an entertaining end to the story. There are better ways to go about finishing this story out, and this is, this was not the way to even continue on to the next point in the plot. This is not the way to do it. So we'll wrap up there for today. I mean, look, Fantastic Beasts, Secrets of Dumbledore. If you're a Harry Potter completionist, you'll probably go see this. If not, I mean, you're not missing much by not seeing it. It's not a tremendously well-made movie. I mean, there's a lot of janky editing. There's a lot of things like that are going to impact viewership and impact your ability to enjoy the movie. But, it's just, and again, David Yates has a style. I understand that David Yates has a style, completely and totally understand that. That said, it's very difficult to follow action scenes if you set them entirely in the dark, just so that way they are, just because that's the motif that you've set since Harry Potter and the, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Like, there's a mood that was set, and he kind of just follows that. It just makes, like, there's an action sequence with Theseus and Theseus and Newt and this giant, like, crab thing, and it's just very hard to follow what's going on. And it's just, look, if you're going to do a story like this, where you're going to do basically like Ocean's 11, where it's like no one knows the full plot, you got to keep it straight for the viewer. The viewer has to be able to keep the plot straight, even if the characters in the show can't. You can do that. That's fine. But on that note, we'll wrap up there for today. If you have not yet seen The Secrets of Dumbledore, it is in theaters now. It will be on HBO Max in about, I would say, 45 days, because the Batman goes to HBO Max on Monday. So if you do want to see it, there will be opportunity. So until then, have a great rest of your week.